Hello everyone, I'm Anmol Kumaru Rao, a student volunteer in Unnat Bharat Abhiyan in the Institute National Law University, Odisha, and this lecture is on the faculty advisor Dr. Kunti Rani Pradhan. Now, for this lecture, we will be looking into globalization and the Indian economy. When we talk about globalization, what is the first thing that comes to our head? It's like the integration between countries through foreign trade and foreign investment. Now, this is the definition in par with economical subjects, right? In the mind, right? So when we take economics into consideration, it's countries, which are integrated via the foreign trade or foreign investment by MNCs. Now, what are MNCs? These are multinational corporations that control the production over several other countries and give services throughout the world or to many other countries. Right now, the production across countries. How does that happen? And what what was the history about it? Now, in early phases of globalization, it involved the process of exporting raw materials from colonized countries like India to European countries or countries like USA. Right. So what happened was when raw material was transferred or say exported from India to British countries or European countries. What happened there was industrialization growing there, right? So what happened was finished products were produced there, and they were sort of distributed throughout the world, or they were sort of given to other countries as well, because generally when we have finished products, we tend to sort of export it to other countries as well to increase trade, right, to integrate with other countries. Now with this integration, some of the multinational corporations spread their economic activities throughout the parts of the world. Now what happened in this situation was that MNCs got more and more power. Now what are MNCs? MNCs are a company, its full form would be multinational corporations, which control production, right? Companies that control production in more than one country. Now when this is the basic definition that we go by, and when we go with MNCs, we talk also about the cheap labor that they get, and why they set up production facilities in different countries is because they get cheap labor and other resources from one particular country. For example, India, China, and countries like Mexico or Eastern European countries have less or cheaper labor that one can minimize with minimum cost and have maximum profit. Now with this maximum profit, what you get is that you sort of gain profit from low labor, right? For example, because of currency differences, right? If $1 equals to 60, sorry, 1 rupee equals to $60, so somewhere around $70, right? So instead of paying $500 to one factory worker in USA, you are paying much less compared to that in India, because you get cheap labor here. Now when you do get cheap labor here, it's not just about masonry or anything. It's also about getting engineers or call centers or etc. Now when they sell their finished products globally and produce the goods and services globally, so these are MNCs. So MNCs do that. They sell their finished products globally and also produce goods and services globally. So this is what MNCs do, right? And when they do that, they sort of the production is divided into smaller parts and across the globes, right? For example, spread of production by an MNC. What happens in this? The nature of working of a large MNC is complex process. For example, we take the example of product is being researched in United States, and the product is industrial equipment. Now when we talk about industrial equipment being produced, first you have to design it, and to design it you sort of produce those design in research centers in United States. Now why United States? Because they have much more capable research center with topmost funding from government, have top notch uh, facilities. They have enough sort of resources that you can say, and they get government funding. So that's why you have research center in United States that are considered well more advanced than other countries. So that's why MNCs tend to have research centers in United States, or sometimes most preferred location is United States, right? And then manufacture its components in China, right? So when you do that, Right. There are research centers in China, but there will be lack of communication. So that's why you do not sort of have research centers in China. Now, but you manufacture its component in China because having cheap labor, having more, when you have cheap labor, sometimes because of more demand of work, right? If you have more laborers, they will tend to have a low income sort of demand as a demand, right? So when you have low income as a demand, you sort of get cheap labor. Now, when these are products are manufactured, they are then shipped to Mexico and Eastern Europe, right? Now, when you ship these items to Mexico and Eastern Europe, you have to keep in mind that these two locations are closer to markets like USA, like Eastern Europe is closer to Britain, Germany, and then etc. etc. Right? So these locations are focused, right? And why do they ship these items? Because they are sending them to get assembled, right? So when they are getting assembled, the finished products then are sold all over the world. Now when this is done, the customer care comes into play. Now customer care, they have call centers located in India, and this happens because we have good call centers, right? With this, we have advantage of spreading out MNC in different countries. Now when we do that, we get skilled engineers who can understand technical aspects of production, that is in India. And Mexico and Europe are useful because they are close, their closeness to markets in the US and Europe, right? So since they are closer to sort of market, they sort of get that, right? So with that, you sort of also get educated English speaking youth who can provide customer care services, right? So with it, you also have sort of all causes to get 50 to 60% of savings for the MNC, and then you earn a lot of profit. Now this advantage is really immense. Now when this advantage is really immense, you sort of start to gain profit, and then the production across the borders in multinational countries is more, and then with that MNCs sort of spread out and you have advantages. You sort of, with globalization of like MNCs, you sort of create jobs as well, right? Now, interlinking production across countries, ways modes of interlinking. Now, how do we interlink production? Right, we interlink production by FDI, that is foreign direct investment, by entering into partnership, joint venture, or buying out local companies, mergers, or takeovers. And the last one is giving orders contract to local companies for supplies, right? This last one is considered a much more viable option than the other ones, right? Because you can see here now, FDI is an investment in a country to have assets such as land, building machine, and other equipment, right? Now why do we do that is because the foreign direct investment is done because they have the motive to earn profits. Now when you have motives to earn profit, you sort of invest in other countries, right? You build up, you buy a land there, you sort of put a factory there, and then you sort of create a whole hierarchy of situation in which you invest in a company, right? uh, it's done usually by an MNC in one country, right? Now, by entering into partnership or joint venture, what you do is you sort of join hands and work one on one with together, right? Now, this is where the local companies come in, and then a big company would help the small company to have greater production. Now, with this, an MNC can provide money for additional investments like buying new machines, right, or faster production. Now with this, you're basically helping out a small company to earn more, and then you are also having a share in that profit, right? Now with this second MNC might bring latest technology. With latest technology, we sort of get more production. With more production, we get, sort of more profits. With that, moving on to the next one, we have buying out local companies or mergers or takeovers. As the name suggests, that buying out local companies, basically you're buying a total company because of you having greater wealth. Now when you have more wealth, you sort of buy that particular company, right? Or you sort of merge with them in a sense that you have 51% shares of their profit, and they have 49% of the total profit that they make, right? Now, or takeover is that the takeover here says that you sort of can exceed the entire budget of the developing country's government. Sometimes MNCs have that sort of capability or wealth, right? So when they have that much, they sort of take over the whole company. And with this, they have more power and influence. That's why they set up more and more MNCs, right? So with this, they sort of can buy local companies or mergers or have takeovers. And now moving on to the next one, foreign trade and integration of markets. Foreign trade and integration of market trade is between different countries of the world. Now, why do we have this? Is because we sort of want to create a place where we sort of exchange of goods is happening, right? We sort of import something, we sort of export something, and this is what creates integration of market. And with this integration of market, the exchange of goods happen, right? Exchange of goods happens, or either a market is established. For example, a company like Samsung is sort of selling goods, right, in India. Sometimes they are pre-made, and then they're transferred to the country via cargoes or ships, right, etc. Now, it is also called an international trade, external trade, or inter-regional trade. Right, with this, we move on to the next one. That is the main topic that we are going to talk about here. That is globalization. Right, what is globalization? It's a process in rapid integration. हमने पहले भी बात की थी, right? तो रैपिड इंटीग्रेशन में क्या क्या होता है कि आप लोगों से मिलते जुलते हैं, आप लोगों से बातचीत करते हैं, कल्चर मिक्स होता है, इंटर गवर्नमेंटल एक्शंस होते हैं, आप ट्रेड एस्टैब्लिश करते हैं, एटसेट्रा एंड एटसेट्रा। जब ये सब होने लगता है, सो देयर इज ग्रेटर इंटीग्रेशन ऑफ मार्केट इन एस्पेक्ट ऑफ इकोनॉमिकल वैल्यूज। नाउ आप इकोनॉमिक्स के पर्सपेक्टिव से सोचेंगे तो इसमें फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट होता है, फॉरेन ट्रेड होता है, एंड देन देयर इज इंटीग्रेशन ऑफ मार्केट बेसिकली। नाउ जब प्रोडक्शन सेंटर्स भी इसके अंदर आ जाएंगे, ठीक है। नाउ नेक्स्ट इन लाइन इज द प्रोसेस ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन, और एमएनसीज प्लेज अ मेजर रोल इन इट, राइट। जब प्रोसेस ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन में मोर एंड मोर गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज आर प्रोड्यूस्ड, investments in technology move countries from one connecting one country to another, right? So in this connection, you sort of also take consideration into migration due to the thought of having a good job, good life, or better education, right? For example, here it is written globalization in market. We sort of have good services, investments in technology, right? So people usually move from one country to another because of in search of better life, higher income, better job, or better education. You sort of move to developed countries which are much better, right? Or sometimes migration happens because you sort of have production facility in another country, but you have to send some of the company experts from USA. A company established in USA has a new plant in India, then they will send some of their employees to India via the embassies, right? Now with this, we see why, like, what are the factors that helped in the boost of globalization. जब boost of globalization हुआ तो उसके कुछ चीजें थी, जैसे कि टेक्नोलॉजी हम जानते हैं कि इसके साथ कई सारे रिवॉल्यूशन आए, जैसे कि कंप्यूटर हुआ, इंफॉर्मेशन हुआ, कम्युनिकेशन ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन हुआ, इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी, कम्युनिकेशन टेक्नोलॉजी, ये टोटली रिवॉल्यूशनाइज कर दिया पिछले 50 साल में, राइट। तो जब इन लास्ट 50 years व्हेन दिस हैपेंड, तो देयर वाज फास्टर डिलीवरी ऑफ गुड्स। आपके पास ई कॉमर्स आ गया, कंपनीज लाइक Amazon, फ्लिपकार्ट, एंड देन एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा। तो ऐसी कंपनीज आने लगी, और वर्ल्ड बहुत तेजी से आगे बढ़ने लगा है ना। इकोनॉमिकल पर्सपेक्टिव, आपके पास मोर इकोनॉमिकल एक्टिविटीज होने लगे, प्रोडक्शन जल्दी होने लगा, सेलिंग ऑफ गुड्स जल्दी होने लगा, सर्विसेज, कस्टमर सर्विसेज ज्यादा बढ़ने लगी। सो इसकी वजह से the access to information became much and more important, and the communication was brought down to the remote areas in the world, right? For example, आप village में भी जाए तो वहां पर भी आपको 4G connection मिलेगा, right? So what was the role of technology in globalization? For example, अगर आप नए टेक्नोलॉजी के साथ आते हैं तो पहले पहले लोग हाथों से कुछ कपड़े बना देते, जैसे कि स्वेटर बुनना। तो स्वेटर बुनते वक्त आप उसे हाथ से बुनते थे, राइट। सो देयर आर न्यू टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसमेंट, जिसकी वजह से आपके पास अब मशीन है जो एक स्वेटर बनाती है। एंड नाउ दैट कुड बी मोर मच मोर एफिशिएंट, क्योंकि आप एक इंसान, एक मजदूर, एक लेबर आपका एक दिन में या फिर 2 दिन में एक स्वेटर बनाता था। अब वही स्वेटर आपका 1 या फिर 2 घंटे में बन जाता है विथ अ मशीन, विथ अ टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसमेंट। नाउ दिस वाज द रोल ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी इनटू ग्लोबलाइजेशन। और अनदर एग्जांपल वी कैन टेक कि एक न्यूज मैगजीन पब्लिश करता है लंदन में, लेकिन प्रिंट होता है दिल्ली में, ठीक है। तो जब जब न्यूज मैगजीन का हेडक्वार्टर जब लंदन है और लंदन को कुछ पास करना है, तो वो टेलीकम्युनिकेशन यूज करेंगे क्यों? क्योंकि अगर उन्हें कुछ चेंजेस चाहिए डिजाइन में, सो दे कैन इजीली pick up a call and then dial the Delhi office and get it printed as soon as possible. Now, moving on, what was the another factor that played in globalization, which was this was a trade barrier. Trade barrier का मतलब क्या होता है? Trade मैंने बताया कि exchange of goods, import export of goods. Barrier is sort of preventing it from coming, right? So what happens is government इसमें restrictions impose करती है. जब गवर्नमेंट ये सब रिस्ट्रिक्शंस इंपोज करना चालू करती है, दे सॉर्ट ऑफ डू इट इन टैक्सेस, और दे सॉर्ट ऑफ import some duties, और import duties an example of trade barrier. तो इसकी वजह से वो लोग टैक्स बढ़ा देते हैं. सो टैक्स बढ़ाने के चक्कर में कंपनीज अपना कम सामान भेजने लग जाती हैं, which is called barrier, because some restriction has been set up. Now governments can use trade barriers to increase or decrease foreign trade, and to decide what kind of goods and how much of each should come into the country. जब गवर्नमेंट ये डिसाइड करने लग जाती है, तो similarly quotas are a way of restriction on volume of quantity or good to be imported or exported. Now, when you talk about barriers, we have also seen an example of India putting a trade barrier for China when Galwan Valley clashes happened, right? जब गैलवन वैली क्लैशेस हुए थे, तो इस टाइम बहुत सारी चीजें हुई थी. गवर्नमेंट इम्पोज टैक्सेस ऑन पीपल, एंड इसकी वजह से चाइना का सामान बैन होने लग गया था. Now, what are quotas? Quotas are government imposed trade restriction that limit the number of values of goods and services that can be imported or exported during a particular time period, right? So these are restrictions, right? कि आप इतने समय में बस इतना ही भेज सकते हैं. So these things are called quotas, right? With this, we move on to what the trade did in 1991. What was foreign trade before 1991? So first, to understand, after independence, the government of India had put barriers on foreign trade, क्योंकि उन्हें अपना एक local market grow करना था, और local market grow करने के लिए उन्हें बाहर के कम goods चाहिए थे. Now when you do that, the producers in the country, क्योंकि competition बढ़ जाता है, और इसकी वजह से foreign trade को government ने कम कर दिया था. फिर at the time, as they were just coming up in 1950s and 1960s, at that time India allowed imports of only essential items such as machinery, fertilizers, petroleum and etc. जब इंडिया ने ये सब करना चालू किया, तब उसके बाद आपके पास नई नई चीजें आने लगी, जैसे कि फर्टिलाइजर्स, पेट्रोलियम एंड etc. राइट. न्यू इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी फिर हमारे पास आई 1991 में. सो इंडियन प्रोड्यूसर्स को लगा कि हमें दूसरे लोगों के साथ compete करना है, हमें परफॉर्मेंस में compete करना है, क्वालिटी ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज में compete करना है. सो गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने 1991 में बहुत मेजर चेंजेस लाए, राइट, इन इट्स strict policy, right? This is strict policy. This is not street policy. I'm really sorry. This is strict policy. सो उनका जो स्ट्रिक्ट पॉलिसी था उन्होंने हटा दिया, क्योंकि दे वर लाइक कि हमारी कंपनीज को भी ग्रो होना चाहिए, एंड दैट्स हाउ देयर वाज राइज ऑफ इंडियन कंपनीज इन द मार्केट, राइट? सो दिस शुड बी स्ट्रिक्ट. सो सो इस स्ट्रिक्ट पॉलिसीज को हटाया गया, right? This decision was supported by powerful international organization like the World Trade Organization. हम आगे स्लाइड्स में देखेंगे कि World Trade Organization क्या होता है. Right. So when we talk about liberalization, liberalization is basically one of the factors of increasing, sort of uh, affecting factors affecting globalization, right? So what liberalization did was, liberalization is sort of removing barriers in some, so which is uh, set up by the government is called liberalization. आप ये definition लिख सकते हैं. In India, it is referred to economic liberalization undertaken by the government of India, resulting in the removal of controls to encourage economical development and a healthy market. राइट. इसका मतलब ये होता है कि जो आप ट्रेड बैरियर्स लगा रहे थे, आप उसे कम कर देते हैं, राइट. और कम करने के बाद लिबरलाइजेशन में ट्रेड बिजनेस आर अलाउड टू मेक डिसीजंस फ्रीली अबाउट व्हाट दे विश टू इंपोर्ट और एक्सपोर्ट. फिर वो प्रोड्यूसर्स के हाथ में होता है कि आप क्या करना चाहते हैं, एंड देन आप freely you can import and export now. Now the government imposes less restriction than before, at last therefore considered to be more liberal. Now पहले से ज़्यादा गवर्नमेंट्स लेस रिस्ट्रिक्शन पुट करते हैं, बट अभी के सिचुएशंस में देयर आर सम टेंशंस विद चाइना, सो दैट्स व्हाई दे सॉर्ट ऑफ पुट अ ट्रेड बैरियर. नाउ मैंने पहले वर्ल्ड ट्रेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की बात की थी, वर्ल्ड ट्रेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की. अब वर्ल्ड ट्रेड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन क्या होता है? इट्स एन इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, ठीक है, जो कि ऑब्वियसली नाम में ही ट्रेड है, तो वो ग्लोबल रूल्स ऑफ ट्रेड के बारे में जानकारी रखता है और उस पे रूल्स और पॉलिसी सजेस्ट करता है बिटवीन नेशंस, राइट. So its main function is to ensure that trade flows are smooth and they are predictable as freely as possible. It sort of supports liberalization of foreign trade and investment in India. So इसकी वजह से WTO की कहने से that all the barriers in foreign trade and investment are harmful. सो इसलिए हमें उन्हें हटा देना चाहिए और मोर लिबरल होना चाहिए. सो देयर शुड बी नो बैरियर्स. जब ट्रेड बिटवीन कंट्रीज आर फ्री तो ज्यादा डेवलपमेंट जल्दी से होता है, एंड there is sort of less competition in the market, or sometimes more competition in the market, depending on the circumstances that a country is going through. So through WTO is supposed to allow free trade for all, and actually it is found that the developed countries have unfairly implemented some trade barriers क्योंकि they have a more say. क्योंकि जो डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज है लाइक यूएसए, तो ये लोग एक ट्रेड बैरियर को सॉर्ट ऑफ फोर्स करते हैं कि ना लगाए, अनफेयरली सम ट्रेड बैरियर्स लगा देते हैं अपने रूल्स पे, बट दे डू नॉट फॉलो द रूल ऑफ लिबरलाइजिंग देयर ट्रेड बैरियर्स, बट दे एक्सपेक्ट अदर पीपल टू डू इट. सो इट्स सॉर्ट ऑफ रॉन्ग, राइट. इट्स रॉन्ग टू से कि आप अपने कंट्री में ट्रेड बैरियर ना लगाओ, लेकिन हम अपने कंट्री में ट्रेड बैरियर लगाएंगे. तो इसकी वजह से सॉर्ट ऑफ मार्केट अप्स एंड डाउन्स होते रहते हैं. उसकी वजह से एक कंट्री ज्यादा डेवलप्ड होती है, एक कंट्री कम डेवलप्ड होती है. अब आप ही सोचिए कि अगर इंडिया में देर आर नो ट्रेड बैरियर्स, देयर विल बी नो लोकल सॉर्ट ऑफ प्रोड्यूसर्स, एंड उसकी वजह से इंडिया के मार्केट क्रैशेस होने लगेंगे, बिकॉज हमारे पास कंपटीशन ज्यादा होगा और हमारे लोकल प्रोड्यूसर्स कम होने लग जाएंगे और हमें सारा सामान बाहर से लेना पड़ेगा. और इसकी वजह से सॉर्ट ऑफ विल हैव नो और लेस नंबर ऑफ less number of less number of people, right. Now, impact of globalization in India, this is one important topic. So what was the impact of globalization in India? So इसमें क्या हुआ था कि इंक्रीज इन इन्वेस्टमेंट बाय एमएनसी हुआ, फिर फैसिलिटेटेड ग्रोथ ऑफ इंडियन कंपनीज, की इंडिया की कंपनीज भी बाहर जाने लगी, और मतलब इंडिया की कंपनीज को भी ग्रोथ का मौका मिला, एंड उसकी वजह से इंडियन कंपनीज इमर्ज एज एमएनसीज like Tata Motors, Ranbaxy, and Asian Paints. फिर growth और service providing companies, and then there was sort of threat to small producers. जैसे कि मैंने पहले बताया, अगर unfair trade barriers लगने लग जाते हैं. So there was a struggle for a fair globalization. और इसकी वजह से आप ये जान सकते हैं कि impact of globalization in India क्या था. So there was increase in sort of what you can say इंक्रीज इन इन्वेस्टमेंट बाय एमएनसीज, दैट इज आवर फर्स्ट पॉइंट. इसमें क्या हुआ था कि वो इंडिया में ज्यादा चीजें लाने लगे. फॉर एग्जांपल, देयर वर न्यू बैंकिंग सेटअप्स. द बेनिफिशियल एस्पेक्ट ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन इंक्लूड द फैक्ट दैट एमएनसीज हैव इंक्रीज्ड देयर इन्वेस्टमेंट्स इन इंडिया. दे वर इंटरेस्टेड इन इंडस्ट्रीज सच एज सेल फोन्स, जैसे कि आप अभी भी जानते हैं, रियलमी, सैमसंग, ऑटोमोबाइल्स, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक, सॉफ्ट ड्रिंक्स, फास्ट फूड फॉर एग्जांपल मैकडोनल्ड्स, डोमिनोज, और वगैरह वगैरह. ठीक है. सो दीज प्रोडक्ट्स हैव लार्ज नंबर ऑफ प्रॉस्पेरस बायर्स, सो इसीलिए वो लोग इन्वेस्ट करने लगे इंडिया में. एमएनसीज, दीज आर एमएनसीज. सो फैसिलिटेटेड ग्रोथ ऑफ इंडियन कंपनीज. इसमें क्या हुआ कि सेवरल टॉप इंडियन कंपनीज जो थी, जो इंक्रीजिंग कंपटीशन से बेनिफिट कर रही थी, वो न्यू टेक्नोलॉजी में अपना हिस्सा जताने लगी, और उसकी वजह से नए नए इंडियन कंपनीज न्यू फोर फ्रंट में आने लगे, एंड few companies also gained foreign collaborations, जिसकी वजह से सॉर्ट ऑफ उन्होंने भी उस कंपनी में थोड़े से इन्वेस्टमेंट किए, और फिर उन दोनों कंपनीज का ग्रोथ होने लगा. सो दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ फैसिलिटेटेड ग्रोथ ऑफ इंडियन कंपनी. सो दिस इज द डेफिनेशन दैट इट्स रिटन हियर. Now, Indian companies emerge as MNCs, as I said, Tata Motors, Ranbaxy, and Asian Paint sort of set up production facilities in other parts of the world. Now, globalization has enabled some large Indian companies to emerge as MNCs. Some large Indian companies like Infosys, जो कि एक sort of कॉल सेंटर तो नहीं बोलेंगे, बट इट्स सॉर्ट ऑफ रिलेटेड टू टेक्नोलॉजी, राइट? नाउ सुंदरम फास्टनर्स एटसेट्रा, सो इन्होंने अपने दूसरे कंट्रीज में भी प्रोडक्शन फैसिलिटीज सॉर्ट ऑफ एस्टैब्लिश कर दिया। फिर ग्रोथ ऑफ सर्विस प्रोवाइडिंग कंपनीज भी ज्यादा होने लगी, जैसे कि आईटी रिलेटेड सर्विसेज, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव एंड अकाउंटिंग सर्विसेज बेनिफिटेड फ्रॉम ग्लोबलाइजेशन। बट एक बैकफॉल था कि थ्रेट टू स्मॉल प्रोड्यूसर्स होने लगा। फॉर एग्जांपल बैटरीज, कैपेसिटर्स, प्लास्टिक टॉयज, ये सब चाइना में बहुत ज्यादा बनता था, एंड देन ये सब इंडिया में आने लगा। और जब ये सब सामान इंडिया में सस्ता था और इंडिया में आने लगा बिकॉज ऑफ लार्ज नंबर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन, सो ये सॉर्ट ऑफ अनफेयर था स्मॉल प्रोड्यूसर्स ऑफ इंडिया के लिए। क्योंकि इंडिया में जब स्मॉल प्रोड्यूसर्स compete करते हैं सस्ते प्राइसेस विद द फॉरेन प्रोडक्ट, दे सॉर्ट ऑफ, जो कि बल्क में आता है, राइट? सो इंडिया में वी डू नॉट मेक इट इन बल्क, वी सॉर्ट ऑफ गो विद व्हाट द मार्केट हैज। सो उसकी वजह से स्मॉल प्रोड्यूसर्स को भी थ्रेट महसूस होने लगा, और इसकी वजह से, कंपटीशन की वजह से, कुछ कंपनीज को शट डाउन होना पड़ा और प्रोडक्शन भी कम होने लगा। सो बेसिकली इफ द प्राइसेस आर लो एंड दे आर नॉट अर्निंग एनी प्रॉफिट, they basically have to shut off the company, and it made people render workless, right, jobless. And this is why we do not have an Indian brand smartphone, क्योंकि मार्केट में बहुत ज्यादा कंपटीशन था, हमारे पास ज्यादा नई टेक्नोलॉजी नहीं थी। बाहर की कंपनीज इंडिया में आके इन्वेस्ट करने लगी, नए प्लांट सेटअप करने लगी, एंड दे डिड नॉट गिव द चांस टू लोकल प्रोड्यूसर्स और लोकल स्मार्टफोन प्रोड्यूसर्स। इसकी वजह से वी डू नॉट हैव अ इंडियन ब्रांड इन स्मार्टफोन्स, राइट? इवन इफ यू डू, आई डोंट थिंक it's um uh, it's sort of come in competition with the top two, right? Apple or Samsung or like OnePlus, etc. Now, the struggle for a fair globalization. Now, this is an important topic. Now, people with education, skill, and wealth, basically developed countries, have made the best use of new opportunities like globalization. So, iski wajah se, uh, sort of, they sort of ensure the profits, right? So, जब ये होता है, so, for instance, the government can ensure that the labor laws are properly implemented and the workers get their proper rights. So, जब ये होता है तो fair globalization की एक expectation होती है कि कोई किसी का job lose नहीं होगा, और हम small producers को support करेंगे, नए rural producers को support करेंगे, which will sort of help in improving the performance, etc. and etc. Now, आप ये पूरा एक बार पढ़ लें, and this is all important. That is the struggle of a fair globalization. With this, we move on to the next slide, that is government and the WTO, right? So government can negotiate with the WTO for a fairer rules, like हम वो हमें stringent लॉज को इम्प्लीमेंट करने ना दे, जैसे कि हमारे पास लिबरलाइजेशन ना हो, हमें अपने स्मॉल प्रोड्यूसर्स को भी बचाना है, तो हमें इसके लिए थोड़े से ट्रेड बैरियर्स लाने पड़ेंगे। सो गवर्नमेंट हैज टू नेगोशिएट और कैन नेगोशिएट विद डब्ल्यूटीओ, राइट, फॉर फेयर रूल्स, and this in turn can help the country. It can also align with other developing countries with similar interests to fight against the authority of developed countries and WTO. WTO में mostly the rich countries are developed because they went through the whole industrialization process, और उन्होंने अपने local producers को बचा के रखा, ठीक है? So, in the past few years, massive campaigns and representations by people's organization have influenced important decisions, right? So, इसकी वजह से कई people organization की वजह से हमारे पास laws implement होते हैं, क्योंकि majority wants the things that they want. If the majority of Indian local producers want to protect the Indian market, वो जाएंगे और वो गवर्नमेंट से बातचीत करेंगे, आप प्रोटेस्ट करेंगे कि हमें अच्छे fairer laws दो. So this is where the government comes in. The government has to ensure that their local producers do not go jobless, because they too have a family, right? So this demonstrated that people can also play an important role in the struggle for fair globalization. And this is sort of a light line, like people also play a big role in globalization. It's all about people, right? Now, conclusion is that globalization is the process. Now, this is the conclusion of globalization. So it is basically a process of rapid integration of countries, and this is happening through greater foreign trade and foreign investment. एंड एमएनसीज इसमें ऑब्वियसली सी बात है कि बहुत बड़ा रोल प्ले करते हैं, राइट? And technology is also one of the things that play a big role. And then liberalization of trade and investment big role play करता है, facilitate globalize को facilitate करता है. And WTO has put pressure on developing countries to liberalize trade and investment, क्योंकि वो sort of unfair rules से खेलते हैं. जैसे कि मैंने आपको बताया कि liberalization नहीं होता उनके पास, या तो फिर दूसरे countries को बोलते हैं कि आप अपना liberalization करो अपने फॉरेन ट्रेड पे, अपनी फॉरेन ट्रेड बैरियर पे, और वो खुद अपने उस पे कंट्रीज पे ट्रेड बैरियर लगाना शुरू जाते हैं. सो इसकी वजह से फेयर ग्लोबलाइजेशन वुड क्रिएट अ बेटर अपॉर्चुनिटी फॉर ऑल. Right. With this, we come to an end with a chapter, um, globalization and the Indian economy. Right. With this, I would like to end. Thank you.